This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country, and we join their calls for justice.
Tom, would you say the best parliaments are hung?
Well, certainly my favourite ones are, yes, in that they have giant cocks.
Giant cocks, yeah.
Yes.
I think we need more large cocks in Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what the Greens have been saying, right? Didn't they have an ad about that or something?
Well, I guess that's like a funny sort of double entendre kind of thing. So if you could capitalise on the funny double meanings of both the hung parliament, in which the Greens would be in the balance of power if we do well at this election, and also the fact of people who wants dudes to have giant cocks. Certainly in my community with all the gays, we love that.
Yeah.
So if someone could bring those two things together,
there was a way to reach, the people who want the giant cocks, and maybe also, dental into Medicare and stronger climate action in the balance of power.
That bit, we need to get that Venn diagram. Stephen Bates's incredible ads on Grindr in the Brisbane area. Tell us all about it, baby.
These ads, if anyone hasn't seen them, there's now been multiple articles about this. They've gone a little bit viral, but our candidate in Brisbane, Stephen Bates, has put ads on Grindr, the gay app, hookup app. Apparently, people also use it to meet friends. I don't know about that.
That was always sad. Whenever I was on Grindr and I saw a gentleman saying, just looking for some friends, I thought, stop wasting my fucking time.
Yeah, no. But anyway, you can put ads on it apparently. And so Stephen has ads on there with the slogans, including, I'll see if I can remember them all. The best parliaments are hung is definitely my favourite. Put Stephen on top this election, spice up Canberra with a third.
That was my favourite personally. I think
really?
that's very clever. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
It's just funny.
And of course, you always come first with the Greens.
Very good.
Yeah. I know that the one that didn't make the cut as well also would have been fantastic. Choke on cock, not coal.
What?
Yeah, didn't you see that part? He was like, we were going to do that, but, we thought, is that too far? Is that too much?
Well, it also doesn't really – it doesn't mean vote for Stephen Bates. Be like, don't choke on coal.
If you vote for Stephen Bates, you will be able to choke only on cock and not on coal.
Just on cock. I see. All right.
Yeah, I don't see what's hard to understand about this.
Well, it's very spicy because he's running against Trevor Evans in the seat of Brisbane, who is also a homosexual. It's very spicy stuff.
It is very spicy. Yeah. They are both homosexuals. Some might say it's good gay, bad gay.
Choose your warrior. And did you see that left renewal Facebook page?
Renewal.
They said, I bet Tom Ballard wrote these.
That's so funny. Well, there you go. They're awesome, Tom. Well done. No, we've had some good memes. I was really enjoying, I know a lot of people are enjoying the memes about situations. If these situations apply to you, you will not be affected by the Greens plan to tax billionaires. I think this was after that butthurt Harry Potter journalist from the Financial Review did that article being like, the Greens want a million billion new taxes. And they were simply talking about billionaires. And so I don't know who started this. Do you know who started these memes?
I thought they came out of Australian Green Memes for Actually Progressive Teens, another fantastic Facebook group.
Okay. Yeah. And they're things like I'm looking at, because they're on the Australian Young Greens page as well, and there's just so many. But it's things like, a value pack, Nescafe Blend 43 instant coffee tin, and it just says, if your office kitchen features one of these, you will not be affected by the Greens plan to tax billionaires and corporations. It's got one of those, it when you see it, those glass top tables that are outside on every share house porch or patio. If you've had a deep late night conversation at one of these tables with your friends at 1 a.m., you will not be affected by the Greens plan to tax billionaires and corporations.
I've got a Safeway mud cake here. If your last party featured one of these bad boys, you will not be affected by the Greens plans, which is fantastic. Now, my boyfriend sent these to me. He loves memes, doesn't really care about politics. Will ask me questions which ones are the Greens again? And he was so impressed by this meme game that he sent it through to me. So it is working. The propaganda is getting out there.
Yeah. We're very clever. We're very funny. And we will institute big cocks into Parliament. And that's a promise.
talk about the Greens, that bunch of idiots.
They want to destroy the social fabric of society.
The Greens get way too good a run in the Australian media.
And I'm not suggesting the Greens are terrorists. I'm suggesting they hate our society.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger to Australia.
Serious danger to Australia.
And with that, welcome everyone to Serious Danger. It is a podcast about green politics in Australia. It is not an official Greens Party podcast. And that's how we can make promises like that. But it is a podcast that is produced by Michael Griffin, our wonderful producer, and it's made possible with the help of the Green Institute. This week, we have a wonderful special guest, the Greens candidate for the Melbourne seat of Macnamara, Steph Hodgins-May. Tom is a sexist, so he decided not to join us for that conversation. Do you have anything to say about that, Tom?
No, I stand by my position. Women, yuck. Don't want to be involved.
Yeah, great. Well, we girl powered it out anyway. So we have that interview. And plus we're talking about housing and why it is so fucking expensive.
Super quick plug. Follow us on socials, please. At SeriousDanger AU. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. And yes, we're on goddamn TikTok.
TikTok.
Going viral, I assume, and connecting with the Zoomers.
We've cracked the 10K on one video. We really do, though. Like, please do follow us on TikTok if you're on TikTok. If you're not, actually make an account and follow us right now. And then help, like, fight the troll, the Labor hacks that are all in our comments that I'm having to deal with right now. Please help us.
Now that is praxis. You could also support this show financially. We are volunteers, Emerald and myself, but our wonderful producer, Michael, deserves to get paid for all the hard work he does listening to our fucking voices. Huge thank you to Liam, new patron, $4.20. Love it. Anika,
Nice.
Lazarus, Jared, Mark, Peter, Priscilla, Stephen, Emma, Lucy and Troy too. Very quickly from the mailbag, lovely emails from Lucy. Hi, Tom and Emerald. I just want to say thank you so much for this podcast. It's inspiring, entertaining, has tipped me over into actually doing something about the shit show we call politics. I've been thinking about volunteering and getting involved for years. Last week, I finally bit the bullet, became a member of the Greens, signed up to volunteer for pre-poll and polling day and data parties, and have completed my first 2 door knock shifts.
So amazing. I fucking loved seeing this email. Honestly, made my day. Thank you, Lucy.
Hero, Lucy. I was super nervous to door knock, but after hearing Emerald's positive stories and your encouragement to feel part of the movement, I did it, and it was so great. Emerald's one of the least positive people in the world, and yet you're still inspiring people out there to get involved.
I'm very cheerful, Tom. Many people say this about me.
What about Troy? Love the podcast. Thank you, Lucy, by the way. Troy emailed, love the podcast. Rare to have the trifecta of funny and smart hosts with great chemistry.
Ooh.
This email was from me under another name. Thought I'd chuck some of my spare Centrelink Oz Study money your way. He's become a patron. He's giving us his Oz Study money, redistributing the wealth. How easy, says Troy. Thank you, Troy.
That is lovely, but also please make sure you can eat.
Patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU if you want to support the show, folks.
Stab Abby and Matt for breakfast. B105.
It has worked already, Stephen, because we were talking about this in our meeting, and Maddie, who does love a good pun, turned around and went, well, I know who I'm voting for now.
Oh, the best parliaments are hung.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's my personal favourite.
Tom, do you have a home?
I do, actually.
Me too. I have one, but I don't own it. Do you own yours?
Well, the bank owns mine, and I bought it with my brother with substantial financial help from my parents. But I am fine. Thanks for asking. The system works as far as I'm concerned.
Young mogul, young entrepreneur.
Now I care about interest rates. Fuck!
It's fun. Yes. Well, it's been in the news. It's been in the news this week. Housing, houses, homes, or lack thereof, rental crisis, homelessness, and of course inflation and the potential interest rate rise. Should we do the economics first, Tom? Shall we do economics corner with Tom and Emerald?
If we simply must, yeah, go on.
If we simply must. So the big news story this week is that we have got the highest inflation rate in 20 years. We had this unexpectedly high 5.1% CPI reading for the March quarter, and now they're saying the RBA will simply have to raise the cash rate, which basically means that interest rates will be up. They're currently at a record low of 0.1%, but they're saying that it could even happen before the election. And they're like, what impact will this have on the election if interest rates go up? Which, I mean, do you understand how all of this works? Because to be honest, I didn't. I had to look it up.
I've kind of got my head around it a bit lately because I've been working on this book for ages, which I will continue to work on for the next 10 years and never finish. But I was trying to truly understand, I think, particularly neoliberalism in Australia, how fucked our economy truly is and how it progressively got more fucked and where all that charts back to. You do all roads lead back to the 1970s when there was this inflation crisis, when everyone was losing their fucking mind about inflation left, right and centre. And also rising unemployment at the same time. That was stagflation. So in researching that a little bit, I kind of got my head around it. I think so, yes.
So the argument is that like the reason that they raise interest rates when inflation is so high, it's a pretty basic like, economics 101 supply and demand thing where they're like, well, prices for goods and services typically go up when demand for them rises. But when it becomes more expensive to borrow money, which is what happens when the interest rates go up, there's less demand for goods and services throughout the economy. So things like, a loan for a car or a house. And so even though prices might not necessarily go down, their rate of inflation will usually decline because there'll be less demand. So the particular emphasis around the impacts of rising interest rates is on housing, because not only will it mean that people like you, Tom, will potentially have to pay more on your mortgage repayments, but it also means that housing prices may fall.
Patreon.com/SeriousDanger AU. Please support the show. Sorry, that's not where it goes.
No, it fucking better not be. Housing prices may fall, which is bad for people like you, Tom, because then if you sell your house, it will be worth less. But for me, very good. And I have to say, I'm okay with it because actually housing, it's expensive. Don't know if you knew this.
What? Hang on.
It's very expensive.
It costs a lot to own a house. But everyone needs a house in order to live a decent life. Like we all need shelter. We've needed that from the beginning of time.
I literally don't know why you're talking about this. This has nothing to do with the current conversation. We're talking about the economy and housing and the cost of housing, Tom. What that has to do with whether people have a home, it's kind of irrelevant.
Sorry.
Anyway, now that you're done with that little outburst.
Mm-hmm.
No, it is like the whole point is that housing prices are up. They are very up. They rose by more than 22% in 2021. They're saying that now they're starting to slow and that, they may dip again when interest rates rise. But generally, looking at the last 50 years or so, it has been harder and harder to buy a home because not only just have housing prices gone up with inflation, but they've far outstripped wage growth. So now it takes about 9 years on average to save for a house deposit in a capital city. And that price to income ratio I was looking it up, I think it's about tripled in the last 50 years or so. So anyone who's well, you're just not working hard enough. It was actually quite easy to buy a house. It's like, because it was easier to buy a house, you fucking dog.
Yes, and this is, one Stephen Koukoulas, famous Labour-aligned economist who refuses to accept that there is a housing affordability crisis in this country and will regularly say, well, interest rates, when the baby boomers were trying to buy houses, they were just insane. It was 17% a year or something like that. And it's like, yes, there would have been challenges in servicing a home loan, but the initial bit where you have to raise enough money, the 20%, the cost of the whole house has gone up, which means your initial deposit goes up and it takes longer and longer to save for that. And while wages are flatlining, the whole thing's a lot fucking harder, mate.
It's very hard.
The kook.
Didn't John Howard also say that there's no housing crisis today?
I didn't read the article. I just saw the headline.
I love it when they bring him out. It's he has a fucking opinion on everything, doesn't he? Fuck off.
Little mole.
Look, I think anyone who follows me on Twitter or knows me as a human knows that I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about renting. I have always been a renter. My mum always rented. I had to move out of my childhood home when I was 13 because our lease was ended. I've rented ever since. So renting is like a big thing for me. And I am pleased that finally there has been more focus on renting in particular this week. Like we often talk about, particularly in election campaigns, we're just talking about like buying a home and, homeowners and home buyers. But the rental affordability snapshot that Anglicare does each year, they released theirs on Thursday, and it was showing that again, so across Australia in March, 1.6% of rental properties were affordable for minimum wage earners and effectively zero for people on income support, so job seeker or the pension. And what they mean by affordable there, if you're wondering, is that the rent is less than 30% of the household budget for low incomes. So they do these. I don't know if you have been following these snapshots before. They do them every year. They've pretty much been like this for as long as I have been looking at them, to be honest. They go through the realestate.com.au listings. And yeah, pretty much every time they come out, they're like, yep, there's, one property that a person on low income or on job seeker could rent in all of Australia. And you're like, cool.
That seems good. So obviously some people on low incomes and on income support are paying rent. They're just paying a massive chunk of their income, which puts them into the category that would generally accepted to be, housing stress, right? Which is a huge amount. And I'm sure there are some parts of the country where it's this bad, but certainly in London, you'll often hear about people pay 50% of their income just on rent every single fucking week. It is bonkers.
Yeah.
I think Australia actually still beats the UK in terms of a housing affordability crisis. I think it's like Hong Kong, New Zealand, and Australia. We're the top 3 in the world, baby.
Wow. Look at us. We are leaders. We are leaders here.
Australia.
Of course, I don't really understand why anyone persists with that, because why don't they just buy a house?
Yeah, that's true.
Like you did.
Well, yeah, and if houses weren't unaffordable, then people wouldn't be buying them, as we know. So it is weird.
It is confusing, isn't it? But no, people are not so much buying homes. In fact, a lot of the time they cannot find a rental. They can't find a home. There are around, or at least 116,000 people who are homeless on any given night in Australia. That's from the latest census data. So I'm pretty sure that data is also not super recent. It includes people who are like in crisis housing and who might be couch surfing, but basically they don't have a secure home. That's a fucking lot of people. That is fucked up for a wealthy country like Australia, right?
Right. And then of course, that is also often compared to how many empty houses there are every single night in this country, like how much like vacant spaces there are on any given night in Australia, which is fucking bonkers. And then somebody will seriously try to defend it, be like, oh, that's probably a lot of people's beach houses.
Sorry, I didn't. Oh, well, that's fine then. They need that, don't they? Don't worry about the, single mum living in her car. It's all good.
Really, if you're living in your car, wherever you're parked, I mean, you can park by the beach, and then you've got a beach house too.
Waterfront. Yeah. Why are they complaining? I think I love talking about my own tweets, don't I? I tweeted about this. This whole show is just a plug for me to just report on my 3 tweets from the week.
What are you, Elon Musk?
Let's not go there.
Okay.
We decided not to talk about that. But I was saying, I'm so fucking sick of these articles that are like, housing, it's really bad. No one can find it. Here's like some poverty porn with, this like disabled woman who can't find a home, this parent of 6 kids who put in 40 rental applications and didn't get approved. And then a lot of the time they won't be like, and here are the solutions that have been proposed and the Greens say that we should build public housing, or they've introduced a bill to do this. They'll be like, head of the Real Estate Institute says that developers are being locked up by red tape and we need to give them more fucking incentives to, I don't know, give us housing, because they would. If it was easier, they would, right?
The mum and dad investors who are doing us all a solid by buying houses and putting them on the rental market. It's very nice of them.
Yeah.
Give them freedom. Stop placing such a burden on them, like, there shouldn't be bacteria everywhere in the house. This fucking PC wokeness red tape is just too much for these mum and dad investors.
Cancelling landlords. Landlords as a protected category in human rights legislation. That's what I say. It's too much discrimination, too much landism. Even against, beloved Albo, because there are some people trying to make a difference in this harsh world. Tom, did you see this lovely story this week?
My heart was warmed when I found out that the potential next Prime Minister of Australia, you know what? Sure, he grew up in public housing. We've heard about that once or twice. And not interested in making people in public housing's lives, substantially better anyway. But he is a fantastic landlord. And so he's actually enacting the solutions to solve Australia's housing affordability crisis, on an individual level.
Yeah. It was this video, I think it was on TikTok, right? And then it got posted on Twitter with this woman being like,
I am the definitive proof that Anthony Albanese, as Prime Minister, is going to fix housing affordability because he's already done it for me. So Albo, by total coincidence, is my landlord. I didn't know that until I went to sign the lease. And at the start of the pandemic, out of recognition that my partner and I are small business people in the hospitality sector, he reduced our rent 25%, which was amazing then. But what's more stunning is that even now, 2 years later, he still hasn't put it back up. And admittedly, things still are patchy in the hospitality sector, but I don't think other people are still getting that sort of support from their landlords. But what it shows is that he lives his actual values and just quietly in private. No one knows about this. Of course, I felt compelled to tell you about it now, but he never asked me to. I don't know if he remembers that this house or I exist. He's got a lot on at the moment.
And everyone was like, wow, that's amazing. That this, just a person in the community has had this experience. Next minute, we find out it's a Labor staffer, of course. Which is funny enough in itself, right? Because it's clear astroturfing. Like, it's her trying to be like, I have no connection with this man. He's my landlord, but he's a really nice guy, you guys. And that's funny enough. But also, there's a point in the video where she's like, I didn't even know if he even remembered that this house existed, that he had this lease. And I was like, that's a fucking problem. This is an ad for this man, and you still are like, he may have so many properties that he loses count and doesn't know that someone's fucking living there. You should vote for him.
Well, lest we forget the former Labor MP David Feeney, member for Batman, now Cooper, of course, did quite famously forget that he had an investment property worth a couple of $1 million that he'd forgot to declare when he was in Parliament. Bit of a whoopsie for old Mr. Feeney.
And I guess to the best of us.
Didn't Albo sell his house for $2.3 million or something? He had a house in Newtown or something. And this man is a multimillionaire. He is not your friend, my friends. I know he's not a working class hero, but I'd argue he's not fighting for the working class either, I'm afraid.
Interesting. This is the problem. You cannot get the solutions that we need to the housing crisis from the fucking private market. Landlords are not going to save us because it's not their job. It's really not. Their job is not to provide housing. Their job is to fucking make money for themselves, and that's why they should be abolished. And so when that fucking myth that is trotted out time and again that the real issue is supply, and so we need to loosen planning laws and build more private housing. And we need to make sure that we give every landlord a fluffy robe and, some Chardonnay, and we just look after them and give them a foot massage, because if there's any hint that it's not going to be fantastic for them to be a landlord, they'll leave. And then what'll happen then? No houses. We need them. Actually, no. We've given the private market a fucking chance to deliver housing, and they've failed because the private market being tasked with housing provision means that housing is treated as a speculative commodity. And all of our fucking laws and our entire taxation system are designed to reflect that. And they're all rigged not to provide housing, but to increase the profitability of housing.
Get those sweet, sweet returns. And, it's so evident in the data, right? Things were getting cooked already in the 80s and 90s. Negative gearing was briefly abolished by the Hawke government, then brought back in when they came under pressure from the sort of landed gentry and all the landlords out there, and Hawke and Keating, lovers of the free market as they were, back down on that. There's this bullshit myth that when negative gearing was abolished, then rents soared and stuff. That's absolute bullshit as well. Yeah. They went up in 2 cities, came down in some others, stayed the same. Just absolute bullshit. But then once you combine negative gearing, where you can have an investment property write off your losses, combine that with the capital gains discount that Howard introduced in the late 90s. And that is seriously when there was this massive boom in Australian house prices, because you can buy an investment property, write off your losses for years and years and years as the price just inflates. As you do this property speculation, then you can sell it for a massive profit and you're only getting taxed on half of the money that you're making there. Beautiful, beautiful system. Again, one of the only reasons New Zealand is worse than us is they have no capital gains on houses whatsoever. So surprise, surprise, we've that 50% discount that Howard introduced, things are marginally better, I suppose, and less cooked than the New Zealand situation.
No capital gains tax. I didn't know that.
No capital gains tax whatsoever, yes. But now, it's just so clear that that's the vibe. And that is when, once you introduced that massive enticing offer to the nation's property investors, suddenly they're all making a loss on their investment properties. That's when you sort of see them actually going into the red and therefore being able to take advantage of negative gearing. And all these new mortgages and banking loans handed out to property investors overtake first home buyers. So shitloads of people getting into the housing market, not to live in those houses, but to purely turn a profit as much as possible and leech off the rest of us and make a profit out of our need to live somewhere in order to live a decent life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the major parties, like, they know obviously the housing is a massive issue. Like, it is, I would say one of the biggest issues that's been talked about in this election. And so they're like, no, we have housing policies. The Liberals have their fucking first home buyers grant that will, like, it just means that, people can get a loan for a more expensive property with less savings and be locked into like enormous debt that they may not be able to repay. And it's all just pumping more money into the private market. Like,
suddenly once first home buyers have more money to spend on their housing deposit, guess what happens to housing deposits and guess what happens to the prices of houses? They've been tried since I think the 60s or 70s. Maybe the Menzies government introduced some version of a first home buyers scheme like decades, more than fucking 60 years ago. They've been trotted out by lots and lots of governments over a long period of time, and they don't do jack shit. And to John Howard's credit, he's one of the few prime ministers who basically just sort of said, I don't give a shit about house prices going up. I think it's good. People come up to me. No one comes up to me and says, fuck you, John Howard, you increased the value of my house. Like, no one says that. Obviously, while there is still a majority home ownership rates in Australia, it's in the interest of most people that house prices continue to go up and up and up because that increases household wealth. Well, we're living in the consequences of fucking up a housing market like that. And we are on track to an Australia in the future in which the number of renters is going to eclipse the number of homeowners. Home ownership rates are actually going to go under the people who are renting. So that is going to make for a truly spicy and fucked up economy.
Yeah. And meanwhile, even Labor as well, obviously we know, just completely back down on their promise last election to scrap or phase out negative gearing. So they've given up, I guess, and the Greens are the only ones still talking about this. We've been talking about it for a little bit. I think it was kind of relaunched a little bit in Richmond this week, Northern New South Wales with Mandy Nolan. And there was an article about the Greens targeting Byron Bay property moguls because it is a fucking I can't remember the statistic now. I don't know if you know it, but the proportion of homes in Byron and surrounds that are just owned by investors as Airbnbs or just as, a speculative rental, it's enormous. And it means that people cannot find a fucking home to live in the area that they've lived in for years because people are just trying to make a buck. It's ridiculous.
Exposed once again, another thing that the pandemic threw up, like when you just had the fucking Airbnb industry losing their minds over the impact of the pandemic would have.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's like we have this situation now where private housing providers are revered because they are literally the only fucking option for most people because of a drastic underinvestment in public housing. And I think people don't realize that that's not the case across the world. It doesn't have to be that way. Like, there are countries where public housing is almost the norm, that's like a lot of people live in public housing. But here it is only for there are a tiny handful of public homes available for the most disadvantaged of the disadvantaged. And if you're willing to wait on the waiting list for, 10 plus years, maybe you can get in to a place that's in an area of concentrated disadvantage, and it'll probably be shit condition, under-maintained, and you'll be treated like a second-class citizen. And that's public housing in Australia. And there is still 155,000 or more households waiting for public housing in Australia right now.
It's I think we still had less public housing than the UK did after the fucking Margaret Thatcher, right? So Margaret Thatcher gave people a chance to buy their own council housing, was fundamentally opposed to the idea of having of publicly owned housing and providing that by the state. And even once she was done fucking over old Blighty, Australia still had a lower proportion of public housing.
Yeah. We're so fucking shit at it. I mean, you were telling me about Labor's policy because, when I talk about housing online, for example, and people are like, Labor has a great housing policy. What is their policy again?
As far as I can tell, very happy to be corrected on this. As far as I could tell on their website, they have 2 planks to their housing policy. One of them is to set up this housing investment fund. It's like $10 billion. And then with the returns that you make on that $10 billion, so I assume that's a giant fund that goes out, invests in the capitalist market across the world, probably buying shares in Amazon or whatever, fucking over the working class all across the globe. Anyway, you use that money, you get the returns on that, you use that to build 30,000 affordable homes, okay? Not public housing, social housing, so managed by a private company. Some of it for frontline workers, like some of it is like allocated for specific frontline workers, I think like veterans, nurses, police, I believe, and women escaping domestic violence. All very nice things, but it's like 30,000 people over the next 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, that's I just if we can rewind, 155,000 people waiting right now,
right,
that need a fucking home,
yes,
it's just 30,000 to look at that and be like, yeah, we help 30,000. It's
you.
I didn't realize it was that trust thing. I think they're doing a similar thing in Queensland, and if it is similar, it's like some dodgy accounting thing where actually that trust is just from an existing pool and they're just like, oh, we'll take some of the returns from that. I mean, I don't know if it is the same thing, but I know it's dodgy fucking accounting here in Queensland, so it probably is the same. Sounds like Labor.
I think there's also money allocated to maintenance of public housing as well. I think that's like an admirable thing because a lot of public housing is extremely run down, as you mentioned. It's so devalued in our society and left to rot, and that fucking sucks for anybody. So fixing that is a good idea. And then the other one is like a regional first home buyers grant, basically, but it's for first home buyers in the regions. You need to be in specific areas. You need to have lived there for 12 months at least. Okay. And I believe the total amount invested in it is $12 million. Which is a rounding error when you talk about the federal budget of a wealthy nation like Australia, multi-trillion-dollar economy.
Yeah. And the way that the housing market is right now, like, congratulations to those 12 people.
They did it. Who will they be?
I know.
Will it be like a lottery?
Maybe.
It'll be PR guy. It'll be Queen Vic from Twitter.
Van Badham.
Van Badham.
That's Sue, the 1 million posts girl on Twitter.
The fucking tenant of Albo, she's getting one. Yeah. That's for sure. Oh, no, she probably isn't getting one because then Albo will be out on the rent money.
Well, that's right, yeah. Oh my God, 12 million. That is fucking insulting, isn't it?
This is their offer. And then they're literally out there, doing the same, like, it's too hard for our kids to buy a house. You're really going to make a difference to that.
Yeah.
We really got to do that. What the fuck are you talking about?
Jason Clare, because he has great comms about how cooked and fucked the housing market is. But it's like, what are you going to do about it? Why are you saying this? You're just making me more sad.
And what they cannot say, what any of them cannot say, is that house prices should go down or at least shouldn't go up by heaps.
Yes.
Every single fucking year. That's no way to run an economy. That's no way to address the housing crisis, to just barrack for these prices to inflate constantly forever. It's just irreconcilable.
That's intentional because, they do not want to hurt the bottom line of property speculators because that's who they fucking care about. Like when we talk about, so the Greens plan obviously is so much better. We actually have a plan to build 1 million public homes over 20 years. And whenever I say that, I'm like, it sounds a little bit crazy. I almost don't like saying 1 million homes because I'm like, it just sounds ridiculous. But the scale of the crisis is so significant that is what we absolutely need. Like, we just, there's that many people waiting right now for public housing, but there's so many more people in rental stress, in housing stress, and our population is going to keep growing. We need those homes. So of that 1 million, it's 750,000 are public and community homes. I don't know, because I know that community housing, I'm not too sure. I guess that just means managed by a community provider. I don't know if that's on land that's still owned by the government. The key problem usually with the distinction between social community housing and public housing is that it's actually not as secure in social and community housing as it is in public housing. But the Greens policy does stipulate that all of those homes, rent will be capped at 25% of income, and you'll have a life, tenants will be guaranteed to stay in their home as long as they want to. Do you know what they mean by community houses there?
I don't, to be honest. No, okay. I do know that, yes, in the...
It was my job to know, probably. Sorry. But yeah, so 750,000 public and community homes, and then there's 125 universal access rental homes. So public housing that is universal. And again, I'm a little bit confused by this wording. I would love to know. Maybe I should find out for my job as well. But because they talk about essential workers, homes for essential workers, they're talking about, nurses and doctors and whatever, people like that. Mm-hmm. But it's also meant to be universal. So theoretically, anyone can have one of these homes, right? Where again, rent's capped at 25% of income and you have a lifetime right to it. And then the final component is interesting. It's a new one I don't think we've talked about before, like a shared ownership scheme, 125,000 homes where first home buyers can buy up to 75% equity in these homes for just $300,000. And if they want to then move out at any time, they can sell it back to the Federal Housing Trust. I like this one because it's a new idea, right? I think it also sounds more real to people because people don't have an understanding of public housing being something that everyone could have. Whereas perhaps do you think it maybe comes across as like, more imaginable?
Yeah, I think like putting a figure on it is really good, and like having a very tangible, clear plan and being unashamed about the fact that, we want the government to own housing, to provide housing to people to live in. And as you say, that should not be something that comes with stigma. That is just perfectly normal. In the 50s, again, in the Menzies government, something like 1 in every 5 new house was built by the government in some way. And that same relationship was not there. This commodification, the neoliberalization, the financialization of the housing market really is 70s onwards, right? So there is a different world did happen under a conservative government. That of Robert Menzies was a very different situation. So that reality can exist, as you say, across Europe, far more common. The investment in home ownership is also just a completely different cultural position. I mean, we say the great Australian dream is to buy your own house, which is so fucking depressing, by the way. But, you might have a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease in a European property. So, no, you don't technically own the place you're living in, but you have rights because it's where you fucking live. And you can make a real life in that place. And it is your home. Yeah. Yeah,
which is exactly, and this is, obviously I would love universal public housing as an end goal. But in the meantime, while we're stuck in the fucking private rental market, rental reforms should be a priority for us as a movement, I think. And we have been trying, and it is part of the Greens platform, is these, national standards. So capping rent increases, ending no grounds evictions, and, rights to kind of put down roots in your homes. And the no grounds evictions thing, that's such a fucking massive one because I think the statistic right now is that like around a third of moves that renters make are involuntary. So effectively, their lease was ended, they were evicted, and they had to move. And in a market like this, like that's fucking so distressing. And it means as well that so many renters will stay in unsafe housing and put up with so much shit because they live in constant fear of being evicted for no good reason. They can do everything right, but if they're maybe a bit annoying by asking that you fucking repair the unsafe house they live in, they're scared that they'll get kicked out at the end of their lease.
Now, people may know, so overwhelmingly rental and housing issues are state responsibilities. And you've seen these, breakthroughs in some states, even though the Victorian rental reforms were, again, extremely basic stuff like you can have a pet and you can put up a painting, all of which was delayed because of the pandemic, right? Like the pandemic was kicking off and like landlords like, we can't deal with the idea of giving people their basic rights.
Not a pet.
Anyway, they were eventually introduced. But is it my understanding that do the Greens have a rental policy to have national minimum standards for renting across all the states?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, that is awesome.
Yeah, because it is something that, like I think that they can set it federally. The states have kind of tried to go it alone. We tried in Queensland, and Labor were absolutely fucking cooked here. Basically, they ended up introducing their own renting bill that not only was obviously far worse than the Greens, but it backed down on even those basic commitments that they had made, like ending no grounds evictions. And in fact, it created new situations where a landlord can end a lease. So both the major parties are just so fucking captured by the real estate lobby. It is deeply depressing and not surprising when, I think their base and also their membership and their supporters and also their MPs, so many of them are fucking landlords. What do you expect, right?
Good thing we don't have any of those in the Greens.
Yeah, it's a bit fucking awkward that our housing spokesperson owns like 4 properties. Like, what's the go, Maureen?
So this is Maureen Frigri, who, I have a huge amount of respect for, and I'm sure, as I'm sure everyone does, but this is regularly pointed to as a problem, mainly by either people who would be sympathetic to the Greens or Greens members, or people think that this is a problem that Maureen herself is a landlord. That's fair enough. David Shoebridge as well, who's the Greens lead candidate, has come under some attention for the fact that his wife owns investment properties and such. It's not ideal. It's probably not an amazing look, but it also, I also think the hypocrisy charge is often overplayed, particularly when you tie it into the fact that, politicians who advocate for policies that would work against their own personal interests through their housing policy, that's something,
Well, that's the thing. I guess I'd rather her be a hypocrite than advance her own interests in this situation.
Yes.
But I still, not a fan of landlords. I don't really know what her response to that is. I don't know. Did you know that in the Queensland debate on those bills, our rental reform bills, Amy, who moved our Greens bill, moved a motion that all the landlords recuse themselves from debate? Yes. Which really pissed them off. They really did not like that one.
I'll be moving that this second reading debate be halted until MPs who are landlords who own investment properties excuse themselves from debate. That's 1 in 3 members in this chamber. It's unacceptable to have MPs who directly benefit from skyrocketing rents and lax eviction laws to be allowed to take part in this debate or to vote on this bill. As landlords, you have a clear conflict of interest when it comes to renters' rights. I am a renter. You benefit from retaining the status quo where renters have such little power, and it's because renters are in the lack of power relationship.
And she was just like naming all of the landlords in the parliament. It was fucking fantastic.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. But we're kind of a party of renters. I remember this article following the 2020 state election in Queensland that Max Chandler-Mather and Liam Flenady, who's his campaign manager and also managed Amy McMahon's successful campaign, they wrote this article for Jacobin about that campaign and, the growing movement in Queensland. And one of the things that they pointed out in particular was that one of the most significant determinants for Greens voters, especially where our vote is growing, is whether they rent, which is interesting, right? Like it is a kind of precariousness. It's often younger people. And the fact that they're probably on lower incomes and they just haven't had a chance to, put down roots anywhere or get up enough money for a deposit, that state of being a renter is it's so much like, it's really kind of like encapsulates a lot of our growing base, I think.
Yeah, sure. And in contrast to homeowners, right? For the vast majority of people, particularly those of the working class or people who aren't the fucking oligarchs, the 18,000 Australians who own 6 or more properties, I believe, for the rest of it, for most people, the house is the biggest asset that they have. A huge amount of their wealth, their economic security is tied into their house and stuff. So if you own the house that you live in, you are seriously concerned about those massive factors. And often it is said that home ownership is this, de-radicalizing measure. It does make people more invested into capitalism as it stands, into conservatism, into economic and fiscal responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. So as I say, it'll be very interesting if things carry on as they are and the population of renters in this country overtake homeowners' ownership. Like that line really does go down and renters really go up, the political implications of that. And it is encouraging to see stuff like both the Greens organising around this stuff and calling the bullshit out where we do, but also things like tenancy unions, Rahu, the rental and housing union, which is a Melbourne-based pretty radical union as well, who do some fantastic stuff. Like, identifying that class, their economic material circumstances can lead to greater solidarity, and like people can organise around that situation and fight for better rights. So
what you're saying is we want the housing crisis to get worse because it'll help the Greens win.
Renters Army. Yes.
Renters Army.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, I thought we could finish on this tweet from Max actually about a door knock that he had this week, which kind of does, it really encapsulates that. He was talking about this conversation. And so this is the full text. I'm a renter, so what does it matter what I think? In quotation marks. That's how a lovely dad of 2 kids responded when I knocked on his door and asked if he had any issues that he'd like addressed this election. And who can blame him when the Labor and Liberal Party treat renters like they're second-class citizens? Well, I ended up finishing my door knock late today because we got into a fantastic chat about why actually his vote and his voice matters a lot. We talked about capping rent increases, which he said would be transformative. He also loved our policy to build high-quality homes and sell them to first-home buyers for $300,000, which can then be sold back to the government for a fair return. After this long conversation, he said, well, I'll be voting Greens for the first time. I didn't realise you cared about housing.
Yeah!
I mean, there you have it, folks. It's the renters. Power to the renters.
That is great. There you go. We're winning the meme war, and we're also winning voters with our good policies that aren't fucking cooked. And look, watch the rest of the election play out. It will be amazing if anybody has an actual serious housing policy that will do anything to address the housing crisis in a material way, because the two majors they can't do it. They can't upset the boomer voting base who just need to hang on to those house prices and watch them go up and up and up.
I wouldn't hold your breath. I would not hold your breath.
Cold makes me hard. Cold makes me come. My dick is always hard to cold, and it's only getting harder.
So our guest this week is Steph Hodgins-May, who has been the Greens candidate for the Labor-held Melbourne seat of Macnamara, formerly known as Melbourne Ports, in 2016, 2019 and now 2022. Welcome, Steph.
Thanks, Emerald. Great to be here.
It's so good to finally have you on, because Macnamara is, it's like one of I think there's a little bit of competition even between Macnamara and Griffin as to which is the most winnable seat. Would you say you're the most winnable seat?
Of course. Yeah. Of course. I think on the numbers, the psephologists told us we were number one. I'm not going to argue, but Max is doing an almighty job up in Queensland. And if we're talking about who's number one in field campaigning, absolutely Max. He's blowing it out of the water.
So gracious of you. I feel like Queensland would be like, no, we're going to win. You're like, everyone's doing fantastic.
I'm not always that diplomatic. We're just getting started.
So it's a 4.9% margin with Josh Burns, the Labor MP, right?
Yeah, look, it's about 3,000 votes we need to take from the Labor Party to jump them and come into second place. So the Libs poll the highest in Macnamara consistently, and whoever comes second out of Labor and the Greens, the preferences kind of flow from the other to jump the Libs. So the last 2 elections we've increased our vote, and significantly we came within 500 votes of winning in 2016, which was obviously pretty excruciating. Counting votes for a month before we knew the outcome, and it was a nail biter. And last time, interestingly, we set out to get a certain target number of votes, and we got that number. But what happened was the Liberal vote just tanked. And that primarily went to Labor. So the gap grew, even though we got what we set out to get in what was a really tough election year. The fact that the Liberal vote just bottomed out.
Yeah, which is it's funny because it's like, that's fantastic. But in that particular situation, the numbers just don't, sometimes it doesn't work out. But hopefully it will this time.
Yes.
Tom actually put the notes here for me as to because I'm obviously not a Melbourne person, but that the suburbs in Macnamara are like Port Melbourne, St Kilda, Balaclava, Caulfield and Elwood, all of which sound extremely fancy to me. I don't know if they all are very fancy. Is it traditionally like a bit of a, well-heeled, like a wealthy area?
It is actually. It's interesting though. It's got pockets of everything. It's got pockets of wealth and pockets of real disadvantage. So it extends, it basically abuts Adams' seat of federal Melbourne and starts from South Bank and runs along Port Phillip Bay. And definitely, like, St Kilda was always the more eccentric of the neighbourhoods within Macnamara, and I'm in Elwood, which, apparently used to be really undesirable because it's got a canal through it that would get stinky, but now it's, property prices absolutely booming. There's no way we could afford to buy there. But then you've got Caulfield, which has got a really large Jewish community. But it's got it's interesting because it's got a very large Jewish community, but it's also got a very large atheist community. I think we have the largest number of atheists in the country in Macnamara, huge public housing community, and a huge LGBTIQ plus community. I think we're third highest yes vote with the equality vote. So all sorts of things, like really conservative pockets of the electorate around Caulfield and Alstonwick, and then really progressive parts in St Kilda and Elwood. And in Elwood, we basically win all the booths. The Greens poll highest. So it feels like a pretty cosy, comfortable place to live as a Greens candidate.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't been to Melbourne in a long time, but I was there a couple of weeks ago and visited St Kilda, and all I could think about was the Paul Kelly song, and I was like forcing the person that I was with to listen to me singing From St Kilda to King's Cross repeatedly, which they were not that happy about. But
we have door knocked Paul Kelly. We've got a lot of celebs actually living in our area. It's a very iconic spot too. Lots of Aussie icons.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So have you been doing, because you were talking about, like you said, Griffith in terms of field campaign is probably still number one, but I assume that's, still a major plank of what you're trying to do. That's how you're going to win those votes. How's the field campaign been going?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it's been going really well, minus the COVID factor, which has really just been knocking off our team members and our volunteers. Just every week there's swathes of people that can't come out because of COVID or are a bit more nervous to come out because of it. We also have a really high density living in Macnamara, which just means it's a very different electorate to Griffith. So there's just a lot of places we cannot get to with door knockers, and we try on the intercoms, and some people will press 50 intercom buttons and try to have a conversation, but it's challenging. Although today I heard that we fully door knocked St Kilda and we're looking for new places to go there. We've got people out every night and every day and every weekend door knocking. So now that the election's been called, there's no shortage of volunteers, and that's kind of what that lift is what we've been hanging out for. And we will hit our targets, I'm pretty confident, but it's really tail-ended. We've got to really smash it out, I think, in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And knowing that more people are going to vote early, like probably even in the next 2 weeks.
That is such an interesting consideration, the whole the intercom knocking thing, because anyone who has been door knocking and you come across like an inaccessible apartment building and you're just trying to ring those intercoms, and door knocking is normally so inspiring and so fun, but it is really rough via intercoms. Like you can't see someone's face, you can't have a real conversation with them, and you're just trying desperately to not get them to hang up.
Yeah.
And it's true when we talk about, even areas like South Brisbane, where we have had such massive field campaigns, but increasingly so those are the types of developments that are going in, and so it'll be harder and harder to door knock. So we will need to find new ways to reach those people.
Definitely. And that's really what we've been thinking a lot about this campaign. And so obviously digital advertising is a really important piece of that puzzle. We've managed to fundraise a lot this election, which I think is a testament to our successive campaigns in the area and how the Greens are kind of being perceived nationally. But it's those primarily young people that are living in the higher density living that, maybe aren't as engaged in politics at the moment that we really need to communicate with. And, piece of mail in the letterbox isn't necessarily the best way of doing that, and also is really expensive. So we're hoping a combination of intercoms, as much as they irk me, as well as digital. And every day we're out at train stations and trying to meet people where they're at in those higher density areas. But sometimes you can get a walk list, and it's just all apartment blocks. And I feel really awkward when I have a great conversation on the intercom to then press the next button, because it seems like it makes it less personal.
Oh my God. I know. And it's also, I'm often conscious in the small ones where someone will be able to hear their neighbor's doorbell go off.
Yes.
I'm like, I want to get it on the first one, because if they hear someone successively ringing different doorbells, they're not going to answer. I'm overthinking it and getting so stressed.
Totally. No, I do a lot of overthinking too.
So I imagine you've been kind of having to have a whole range of different tactics, and there's been a lot of I know there has been a lot of interest, media coverage of Macnamara, and some really cool stuff coming out about your campaign. And I think the day that this episode will be coming out, you're launching a new policy or a new plan with Janet Rice about support for the queer community.
We are. So Sunday at the Pride Centre in St Kilda, which is just the most amazing institution, we are launching our Equality Now policy, which we're going to have a series of performers. We're going to have Janet. We've got Jason Ball moderating a discussion. And I think really at the heart of that is the fact that we are basically fed up with the flip-flopping of the two major parties who are unwilling to stand up for our LGBTIQ plus community. And we want to see the creation of a Minister for Equality, which we think is just such an obvious role that we should have in the Parliament but currently don't. We also want to get rid of the school chaplains program, and we think we should be using that, I think $60 or so million towards secular support for young people, young LGBTIQ plus people. Obviously building a lot more public and social housing, which every single day I meet with individuals and as well as service providers that are saying that they just cannot get crisis accommodation, they can't get short-term accommodation. So a significant portion of that will be for the LGBTIQ plus community. Similarly, we want to put $15 million in towards supporting gender-affirming surgery. So that, I think, is, again, something that we hear over and over again is unaffordable and really should be considered as part of our public health package. So there's some really exciting things coming through. I'm really proud to be launching it. Especially, I don't know if you saw the media in Macnamara about Colleen Harkin, who's the Liberal candidate here.
I was just gonna, So that the Liberal candidate is just like pretty straight out gross transphobe, right?
Yes, yeah. Look, we had a debate last Sunday, and it was the first time I'd met her. And she turned up 45 minutes late to begin with, which, was a little disruptive. But then I think within the first 10 minutes was basically lauding Catherine Devs and saying all sorts of deeply offensive things. Then moved on when we had Anne Sharma there, who was the lead litigant against the Environment Minister, saying that she owed a duty of care to young people, and she basically likened education about climate change to young people to child abuse. So she really has form, and the Libs in Macnamara last election, they had a similarly offensive candidate who not only managed to offend women without children by saying that they basically couldn't make decisions if they didn't have kids.
Normal ideas.
Yeah, she managed to offend her own Jewish community by comparing her Jewishness to the other candidate's Jewishness, and it was So they really, and Colleen is the second candidate they've had here. The first one withdrew a couple of months ago, and she's a replacement. So I don't know what's going on, but they need to. Far out. Their ship is definitely not in order.
Well, and this is one of the other things that I understand that the seat kind of has a history of not only, like some really kooky and like, I guess, not just kooky, but damaging, dangerous candidates and just a history of like pretty dirty and intense campaigning.
Oh, yeah. I was absolutely not prepared for what happened in 2016. It was a really close election, and I don't think anyone knew how close it was going to be. Like we, at the time, we were obviously in it to win it, but we thought this is maybe a two-election strategy. But there was a very concerted campaign against me. And I can say, I can't prove it was all the ALP, but when we saw what happened on election eve and the ALP, I'll call them stooges, were out caught in a vehicle with no registration plates on it, wearing surgical gloves with bolt cutters, cutting off our materials from the fences. And they were, one of our Greens candidates went to stop them and chase them, and they drove into him, and he ended up on the bonnet of their vehicle.
Oh my God.
And these are very senior ALP figures in that vehicle, and then went to the federal court and had to face up to charges soon after the election. And, I think they got a slap on the wrist in the end, but there's footage on YouTube of them driving into a volunteer. So wild stuff, wild scenes. When you're setting a volunteer up and, training them up, you say usually people are pretty nice, and it's very rare that someone will be rude to you. Maybe they'll just say they're busy, and then next minute they're being literally attacked by
oh my God.
Yeah, by adults who should know better. So it's wild.
It's pretty impressive then that given that experience that you had in 2016, you still decided to, come back and try again. I think it's quite admirable. How did you think, is this really worth it? I'm sure there were times when you were I don't know if I want to go through that again, right?
Look, I'm pretty defiant, and if anything, I think it made me just want it more because I was like, these guys do not deserve this. Michael Danby was just such a hard right conservative ALP member who I had just met countless people who never heard back from him when they contacted his office, or if they did, received verging on abusive correspondence back from him. I saw his conduct at the polling stations. He's the one who did a dual how to vote card that he was like profiling people as they came in and handing the official Labor how to vote card, which preferenced us, to the younger, kind of more moderate looking people. And then he would hand his separate printed in the office how to vote card that preferencing the Liberals ahead of the Greens.
That was illegal. Maybe you can have, I thought you can only register one how to vote card.
Well, I actually didn't look into the AEC rules, but certainly for the ALP, it was a really big headache because it made national news that they were trying to get up, like they were supporting the Libs here. And it was such a close seat back then. The Liberals don't really have a chance here now, but he was the one who attacked Sophie McNeil, the ABC journalist, and was putting out paid ads against her work as a foreign correspondent. So, yeah, it's got a checkered history. But even now, the current member, the Labor member, is very nice by all standards, and he was Michael Danby's chief of staff previously and has worked worked for Dan Andrews before coming into this role. Much nicer, but still, from my point of view, cookie cutter candidate that needs to be replaced.
Yeah. So I assume you've been campaigning for some time now. When did you kick off your campaign?
Oh, gosh. I feel like we haven't stopped campaigning since 2016, but officially probably a year ago.
Yeah. And what do you think has been the highlight so far?
Oh, there's so many, and they're often just the littlest things. Yesterday I was in a cafe in South Bank and doing an interview, and I was quite nervous about it, and I got to the end and the waitress came over to me and she was like, "Are you Steph?"
Aww.
And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, I love what you do. I love you so, I love your work so much. I want to give you this croissant." And I opened the box and it said "Go Greens" with the little love hearts all over
God,
it.
that's amazing.
Which is so sweet because you don't, as a political candidate that's not elected, you don't get recognised, and kind of that's nice sometimes when, but it was just a really sweet moment. But another highlight, I think, overall of my campaigning life was we had this dingy little office and we were sitting in there and we were just working our butts off on the phones, and a guy came in with a letter. And he sort of was really anxious and nervously walked into the office, and he handed the letter to me, and I quickly said, "Oh, thank you so much. I'm not sure what it was, but see you later." And after this frantic night of phone calling, I opened up the letter, and it was the most beautiful handwritten letter from a refugee named Muratza Ali, who lived locally, and he said, "I just want to let you know that I'm a refugee and my family are refugees, and we feel like no one but the Greens listen to us and care for us and want to take action for us. And we own a local business and we want to offer your campaign team half-price pizza for the rest of the election." So we ate a lot of pizza, and he endorsed me for my candidacy after that, and we still have a really lovely friendship. So, yeah, that was a highlight. Yeah. I would say on a similar vein, this is like a low light to a highlight. Recently, I went to Park Towers where we had, I think at the time there were over 30 men still locked up in this hellhole in Melbourne City to record a film. And as soon as I got there and looked up at the window and saw this guy's hands up against the glass with the 9 years too long sign below, I just, my whole being just dropped, and I felt just so immensely sad and disgusted and angry. And we got through the filming of the video, but by the end, this guy was still there with his hands up against the glass, and we ended up communicating, and I gave him my phone number. And he called me and we spoke fairly consistently in the weeks after that. And every time people would get released from Park Hotel, I'd message and say, how is it you? Is it you? And he's like, "No, it's not. It's not."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden one night I got a phone call, and with this really nervous and excited voice saying, "Oh, Steph, I'm out. I'm just going through the steps to get my security belongings back, and we're going to a hotel, but I'm out, and I'm going to need some time to settle." And I just felt like this burden and this was lifted off my shoulders. But still, one of the first things he said is, "Not everyone's out yet, and I can't be truly happy until they are." Anyway, I got a text message about a week ago. It was a photograph of him standing in front of one of my placards in St Kilda and pointing to it. And we still haven't met, and he's still got, a heap of health issues that he's got to work through. Yeah. He was on a prolonged hunger strike and will never have full, proper intestinal functioning again. But it just shows, I think, the pressure of what having Greens and having independents and having wonderful people turning up every day to campaign and advocate and support these communities means. Because if it weren't for us, we know the major parties wouldn't do it. And I feel, really pleased.
I mean,
about
I
that.
ask you why you came back and, campaigned again after having such a shit time of it in 2016. Like,
it's those moments.
Obvious. I didn't,
it's those moments.
It's that.
Yeah.
Oh, you made me a little emotional. That's it is true. It is those I think in every campaign there are moments like that.
It's those moments. They really, and at the gym this morning, a woman's like, "Oh, you cleaned the floor with Josh at the Climate Forum the other night," and I was my first time back at the gym, and I felt really self-conscious and wondering who. She just came forward and said that, and I said, "Do you know? Because you have low self-esteem in campaigns, and you feel like crap a lot of the time, and you have to really force yourself to get out there." And I just got really emotional. I'm like, that just means so much to have a compliment when you don't expect it from someone that would. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we keep coming back.
I know. Yeah. I think we're probably running out of time before we before I let you go. Is there anything in particular that people should do to support your campaign? Anything that's coming up that you want folks to be aware of? Anything like that?
Definitely, if you're listening to this and you're in Macnamara, South Bank, St Kilda, South Melbourne, Port Melbourne, Albo Park, Middle Park, any of those suburbs, we'd love for you to put a placard on your fence and come out in the last few weeks of the campaign. We have a lot of fun. We've got an office in Balaclava on the main street and, huge amounts of foot traffic coming in, a lot of young people involved, a lot of climate strikers, and we're having a lot of fun. So if you hear this, get involved. If you're on social media and you don't live locally, give us a bit of a plug and push out any content that you think resonates. Keep an eye out for the Equality Now launch. I think it's going to be a great event and, I think it's really time for a celebration for our LGBTIQ plus community who have just been treated like absolute shit for the last few months and beyond. And if you're borderline not sure who you're going to vote for, the biggest thing we're up against in Macnamara is this idea that's perpetuated by the Labor Party that there's such thing as a wasted vote, and that if you really want to kick out Scott Morrison, you've got to vote for the Labor Party, which is absolutely not true. So vote one Green if you're undecided. And if you want to have a chat to me anymore, my number's on the website and I'd love to meet you.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Steph Hodgins-May.
Thank you, Emerald. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, we want to look at flood mitigation. Of course, that's part of the
solution. Look at it or support it?
Well, no one's come up with a decent suggestion for us to look at.
Hang on.
Well, I'm sorry.
Hang on. No, hang on.
Emphasis on decent.
Well, hang on. Well, you're going to insult all the hard-working men and women who work in the
ones you sacked when you were Premier.
State Department.
12,000 public service workers.
Wow, that was a great interview, Emerald. I enjoyed listening to that. It was really good. Two women talking.
We love to just chat, don't we? Sorry, we were just having a bit of a gossip, Tom.
Not enough men for my liking. Obviously, support Steph's campaign if you're in the Macnamara area. We're getting real close to election day and pre-poll, and all campaigns everywhere can always do with new volunteers. But, as we've said, that is a serious chance for the Greens, a really potentially winnable seat. And if you want to be part of history and get involved with that, then please do. We should also mention today is the 1st of May. It is May Day. It's otherwise known as Labor Day or International Workers' Day. You might be having a public holiday tomorrow.
If you're in the great state of Queensland, I don't know where else.
I think WA maybe as well, but don't quote me on that. But obviously a day that for more than a century has been identified to celebrate the working class, workers' rights, workers' solidarity. There was a general strike in the US for the 8-hour workday. It's called the Haymarket Affair. Very interesting. Look that up. That happened a long time ago. There was a big general strike, trying to get 8 hours a day. So, workers' rights, thumbs up. We like that. There are lots of rallies happening all around the country. We'll put some link in the show notes as to the various places that are putting on shindigs. You can go along and raise your fist and check out your fellow comrades. Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong. There's May Day in South Australia and Bendigo as well. We'll put the details in the show notes if you want to get out there. If you haven't already, if you listen to this on the day it comes out, then you can get out there and get involved. There's also an international online rally for Workers' Day, which I think the the World Socialist website is organising as well. If you want to get involved at an online rally with workers all around the globe, then you can do that.
I think you should do that. Also, yeah, I mean, consider joining your union. Some unions do great work, and you can be active and do lots of good work. But also, my top tip, if you want to be a good comrade, is talk to your colleagues about how much you get paid, especially if you're a dude. Seriously, do it.
Just check in on that. There is some bonus content on the way. I've had some conversations with other Greens candidates. We're going to try and get to all the ones in the targeted seats before Election Day. And I've got some sweet, sweet bonuses. Some of them is me talking to women. Some of it is me talking to men who are Greens candidates. They're going to be coming up on your feed, your Serious Danger feed, for free over the next couple of weeks. So keep an ear out for them. Thanks, Emerald Moon. Have a great... What are you doing this week? Tell us. What have you got coming up from a Queensland Greens?
I don't want to know too many things. It's fucking hectic at the moment, but it feels it's good energy. It's good energy.
Love it. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next week.
Bye. I love you.
Serious Danger Australia.